Hello, I'm talking to Daniel Cohen today, most currently line producer at Netflix, working on a feature film, animated feature film. Daniel's originally from the UK. Daniel, if you could maybe tell us a bit about that story. How did you start in the UK? How did your career get going? And then transition to America. How did that all happen? So if we could spotlight first on the UK. I'd love to hear about a little bit about your career.
Well, I think my career can be defined in many points by a mixture of persistence and extraordinarily good luck. So I had an artistic background. I often tell people my high school in England was very much like Hogwarts with not quite so much magic. They produced bankers and accountants and people in the city. And in the middle of this, I got interested and I wanted to do something film, photography, television. And I remember at a careers evening with my teacher, sitting between my parents. The teacher looked down his glasses at this thing that I'd written that I wanted to get into film, photography, television. And he said to my parents, the film world is a closed door, and it's like, don't even try. That's the British spirit. Don't even try. It's too difficult. Much better to go into accountancy. And that was my challenge. So, but in the middle of this school, I had a really good art teacher who kind of took me aside and focused me on art. And I went to art school, had art training. And at the end of that, I became interested in specifically in animation. And I like I said, had an artistic background, limited ability with a pencil. I recognized that lots of people around me were much more proficient with the pencil. And but then so I went to art school, loved animation, and at the end of that, I applied to virtually every single animation company in London. Wrote about 50 letters. The one letter that I sent to the incorrect address, I sent it to their old address. The company had moved out. The company that had moved into that address knew the forwarding address. They happened to be going that way that day. They took my letter and they put it in the hands of the head of the company. They just happened to need somebody to make their coffee and mail their letters. And that was my entry into the animation world.
Wow.
So in that company, I started to do, I was a gopher, runner. And then they had a big project on. Then I got into ink and paint. And ink and paint then led to, gave me enough experience. I had like 2 or 3 years of experience. And then Disney moved to London to make Who Framed Roger Rabbit. And I jumped onto that in their ink and paint department. And after a few weeks, they put me into animation check. Worked on that movie, then worked in the London animation industry, which was specifically focused there on commercials. And from that, so working in commercials world in London, where I met a New Yorker, married the New Yorker, and that was the point I jumped over in about 1995, jumped over to America, and then went on a vacation to Disney while I was waiting for my immigration paperwork to be stamped. And I had met while I was I went to, what do you do when you had 6 weeks to wait? There's nothing I could do. I couldn't work. What do people do in this country? They go to Disney. They go to Orlando. So I took a trip to Orlando.
Yeah.
Met some people I'd worked with on Roger Rabbit,
Oh.
and they said we're hiring at that point for Mulan. So then that was another fortunate circumstance that
Wow.
then I joined the Disney team in Orlando. So I was there for about 7 or 8 years working on Mulan, Lilo and Stitch, Brother Bear, Hercules too. Behind me, it's always a fun thing I was sent to California to help them. That wasn't an Orlando movie, but we were sent to California to help them finish it. So from Disney, then one fine day in March, Disney closed the animation studio in Orlando, and I had the whole time because originally I was aiming to I married a New Yorker, and New Yorkers only want to go live in New York, and we ended in Orlando. But I kept in touch with a company, Curious Pictures.
Right.
And it's really odd that my relationship with them was with the company. Every time I came back to New York, I'd pop in to see them. And it was like different owners, different people running it. And it's like I kept a relationship with the company and whoever was running it at the time. Until finally I had, we were thinking of moving back to New York, and Curious Pictures then hired me on making commercials and a few animated shorts. They're very creative. I loved Curious because they did a wide range of different kind of animated projects. Now in London, I'd always been proud of my resume because I would go in, like, was one company after Disney. I went in for 3 weeks, and 7 years later, I was still there. I was always looking for somewhere to commit, and so I arrived in New York expecting that same kind of thing. I'm looking somewhere to hang my hat. I'm all in. I want to join a company and then just help them grow with them.
Yeah.
But New York was kind of a different kind of animal for me because I would go in for like specific projects, and then there was a lot of work in New York. Most of the animation talent was in visual effects and commercials. So I did a little bit of everything. So it seems like there's a common core to everything I do. There is a creative environment with various personalities, as we all know. So various creatives, and a client who needs something delivered on time, under budget, or on budget. And so, that was common to all of these projects. But New York gave me an education in visual effects. And I was working in visual effects, and then along came this thing, I don't know if anybody's heard of it, called COVID. And it luckily, two things I think in the animation world. One is that animation is something people could do from their houses as we all retreated into shelter of our homes. Yeah. Animation was something that people could do from their homes with technology. And also the company I was working for was really fortunate that we had about 6 or 8 months work where it had already been shot, and all that was needed was the visual effects to add to different shows. So we were working on this because, of course, it's all going to be over within 8 months, right? Because it couldn't possibly last this pandemic couldn't possibly last longer than that. Yeah. So then things started to get a little scary. At the end of it, everybody's kind of drawing back on work is sort of drying up, and everybody's moving backwards. And in the middle of this fortunate circumstance, my next fortunate circumstance. So during COVID, I was involved with the Post New York Alliance, which is this industry group of post-production editors, visual effects, animation, and they were looking for ways to engage their membership remotely. So I joined this panel, and specifically, I wrote an article on things I was doing while I wasn't on a train. I was using my time. I set myself a challenge to grow things in my garden that from seeds and cuttings that I could only find in and around my house. And I wrote about this, and I wrote about this balance, this new work gardening life balance. Yeah. And I wrote it for the New York Post New York Alliance for their green initiative. Right. And they asked me to write this thing every week. And I was writing it, and like I say, this article I posted them on LinkedIn, but there's these sort of balance between being in the garden and how it, and also I was trying to keep it connected to work, being, the work industry website. Sure. So, and then Pam Coates, who was the producer of Mulan, I was reminiscing in one of the articles about this moment we had at Disney, and she wrote to me saying, I remember that moment. That was a fun thing that we used to do. And that got a conversation started, and I asked her, well, what are you doing? She was producing a movie at Netflix, and said, oh, are you interested? Yes, actually I am, because and 10 interviews later, it was a long interview process at Netflix. 10 interviews or so later, wow, I was hired onto Leo, which is this Adam Sandler movie. Excellent. And so that's what I've been doing for the last almost 3 years. Actually, it was about 3 years. 3 years ago in November, December that I was interviewing, and I started early. Wow. Year.
So I'm curious about a bunch of stuff. I mean, it's fantastic. To me, I was writing some notes. I thought, okay, I need to garden in the house. I need to write about it. And I need to tie in stories of people I worked with. But it's interesting how these conversations start, isn't it? And we live in quite a small world where these happenstance, it's I've met other people that worked on Roger Rabbit as well with similar kind of things where bumped into a producer on the street, had a chat, and said, "Hey, do you want to come down and paint some cells and stuff?" All of a sudden they're in the animation industry. So it's amazing how some people get connected with things. But I'm curious about obviously Leo. It's an animated project, and Adam Sandler is, I think, an executive producer on it, or producer. Am I correct?
Myself, I'm a line producer on it.
You're the line producer. No, but it's all basically.
Adam Sandler himself is a producer. He's
Yeah.
also a writer.
Right.
And to the extent that he could, in between like shoots, he did a shoot where he was like very special visual effects heavy. So
Yeah.
he was on wires on a green screen for 3 months, and that was
Wow.
tricky. But he was very, very much. This is his idea.
Yeah.
That he often says, he would often tell us that it came from an idea. He wanted to show his kids the movie Grease.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And he couldn't because it's not really suitable for kids, and that set him it set him off on this thought that he wanted to do like something set in a school that was for children and also for adults. Like being Adam Sandler, he wanted to have a little humor in there that for the parents, which I appreciate as well as a parent, that parents could appreciate too. So
Yeah.
he was involved. So he was in and out of the production certainly in between shoots. He was like full on with us.
Yeah.
Then and we also in his absence we had 3 directors, because why not have 3 creative minds on a project? So we had Robert Smigel, who was also a brilliant writer on the movie, and then David Wachtenheim and Robert Marianetti. They'd worked with Robert Smigel on the Saturday Night Live cartoons, and so between the 3 of them, they were the directors. So we had this structure, and you asked me about the structure of it. We had Adam Sandler as a kind of a de facto 4th director, and then the 3 other directors. We had Happy Madison and the execs at Happy Madison, and Netflix too. Everybody, and that was a big part of my job. And I, people ask me about like one of the key parts of my job is communication, and so partly it was my job. Also, we had a terrific production team. In the beginning, we had Nicole Heron and then Mireille Soria, and a terrific production team to kind of manage this communication between Happy Madison, Netflix, and also when we got into full production, we animated at Animal Logic in their Vancouver facility, and then that grew, and we used their facility also in Sydney. Sure. So it was a question of timing. So we had also our directors were on the East Coast. So Smigel's in New Jersey, the other 2 directors in 2 different parts of New York, and Vancouver, LA, and then wherever Adam Sandler happened to be, we would make sure that he had a monitor, he could see things and approve. Wow. And by the way, a little side thing, that there's a point very early on when Adam Sandler was giving notes. And sometimes creatives give notes, and you go, "Oh, all production, like we're almost like even done with something," and then you give a note. I would say, without exception, there was a point which he'd give a note, and you go, "Yeah, he's right. You know what? He's right." Right. And this is, early on, I was thinking, this is why he's successful. That he would he would give notes that were very specific and very targeted, and also like very clear. Like there are certain things he wanted, like that the movie is set in Florida, and he wanted Florida to be almost like a character in the movie. And so whether it's in the sunshine, the way the shadows fall, we go into the Everglades at a certain point, and it's that whole feeling that it was very important to him that Florida would be a character, and also that all these children in the movie, each one represents like an insecurity from a child. Cool. And his character, in a very funny way, it is honestly, I read recently what I thought was a very kind of unfair, not a review exactly, but just somebody was kind of summarizing the movie, and they clearly hadn't read it. They clearly hadn't seen the movie, because it is an extraordinarily sweet and funny movie. And I'm not just saying that because I'm the line producer. I like to be proud of all the things I've worked on. I've seen this movie literally dozens of times, and I'm still not bored with it. There are some, even the greatest movies that I've been lucky enough to work on, by the end, I'm thinking, oh God, I just don't want to see this movie. And often I need some period of time before I watch
Sure.
it, and then I can appreciate, oh, this is something that's pretty good.
Yeah. Yeah.
Even Lilo and Stitch, love Lilo and Stitch now, but at
Yeah.
the time you were working, you're just buried
Yeah.
in it.
Yeah.
This movie, it just makes me laugh, and it makes me, and it's sweet, and it's got funny songs in it, and it's got, it really, I'm plugging the movie. I don't get anything from this, but like, I really love it. It's a really
Yeah.
sweet, movie. So in order to, like, so
But it,
getting this movie done was the challenge, and
yeah.
in the geographical location of everything, making sure everybody was on the same page at any given time, that was part of my job as a line producer, and also
Yeah.
making sure people had, as a line producer, my main focus is the budget. So
Right.
I was given a budget. One of the, actually, the first thing I did was look at the budget, digest the budget, own the budget, and then realize that the budget was done at a time where it's a best guess.
Yeah.
So we're guessing that COVID's going to be over, and that the directors and myself, we're going to move to LA. Everybody's going to move into the
Right.
Netflix office. We got into, and toward the end, that could have happened, but there was a point in production we realized things were going well. We had production support literally covering across America. We had people all over. As long as, like, these are our hours, so we basically kept to LA hours.
Yeah.
And people could be wherever they were. They would do their job, and it was working. So why fix something that isn't
Sure.
broken?
Right.
And so, but meanwhile, we had, like, my responsibility, we had a budget that included relocation for the directors, and we realized we weren't going to use that money. So
Right.
then, at a certain point, we convert that money into travel. So now we know, and at the beginning of this year, directors were traveling pretty much monthly to to LA, to Vancouver in Canada, and then back to New York. They were doing this sort of triangle of production, and making sure everybody's where they need to be on any given moment in production. Important key moments in production.
Sure. Yeah, it's interesting you say that, because, I think a lot of studios I worked in for years, and this work from home thing was like a boogeyman or a bugbear or something like that. You could never bring it up, right? Because, and I had a vice president of HR at one studio, and she just said, look, if we open the door to this, then someone will want Wednesdays at home and someone will want Thursdays at home. And she said the whole studio will just be really difficult to manage. Also, at the time, a lot of studios said all the work needs to be done inside these four walls and this roof.
I can tell you a story about that too, because
Yeah.
when I was working in visual effects, we were working on a show for Apple. We were about to start a show for Apple, and Apple security was incredible. I think that they converted their necessary security for their phones, and they converted it to visual effects production. And we were talking, I was having discussions about they were going to put a guard on a door. We needed to black out the windows. People were going to go in. They had to give up their phone at the beginning of the day, and then they get it at the end of the day. This guard would stand guard, the blackout. Then along came COVID, and they do whatever you need to do. Just whatever you need to do.
Get it done. Yeah.
And it was that security thing. I think that's the thing that also I love in the colleagues that I've had, is that everybody has ownership in this show, whatever it is, and everyone loves it. Everyone wants to work on it. We're working. I've worked on the Marvel shows, Luke Cage and the Punisher. They were very concerned that people would be working from home, then it all get into the press. I don't think there was any leak, because everybody cares about the work that they do. And I don't think they found any security leaks. And that was very funny that Apple would just go, okay, just get it done. I don't care how you get this done. And then they found out that the shows all happen. There's no security concerns. So I think that went away, which I was kind of happy with, because as people came back, now there's this hybrid world where people can come in like a few days a week, and that work-life balance is actually, it's improved, and I hope it stays. And depending on productions, I think it should stay.
Yeah, that's I think Yeah, I don't know if you guys have talked about it, but longstanding joke in my mind always has been we're working on children's animation, but no one has time for their kids. They're at the studio 60 hours a week or more. And people romanticize, oh my gosh, you work in the animation or the film business. That sounds fantastic. Or, and they have this kind of like rose-colored glasses thing. I'm like, dude, it's a lot of work. It is a
Yeah.
lot of work. So no, it's interesting. We've all come through this COVID period, and it definitely has been, to your point, I did security audits for Apple and for Disney back in the day, and we would run around studios and go, okay, one more camera there, and you need to black this out, and if this door opens into this room, we need to have a curtain in there so that no one walking down the hall can see. We were frosting windows and blackout curtains, and if anything was printed, anything creative, any boards, anything that went up, any layout drawings, they all had to be destroyed at the end of the day. They couldn't be left because a night cleaner might come in with a camera and this sort of thing, right?
Yeah.
And so yeah, that the irony of going through the stress and the drama and the expense of all that for many, many years, and now people are making movies on their kitchen tables. It's the complete opposite. But I was curious too, like, and you're probably curious. A lot of people are wondering, where will it go now in the future? Will it go back to what it was? Will we be able to maintain a hybrid? Some companies I've talked to, they really want the production team together in one spot.
There's
Yeah,
definitely a value to that.
right,
I'm an emotional person. When I met my crew in person for the first time, and I think it was a year before I met even one person that I became so familiar with in that
yeah,
Zoom world, I'd filled up with tears because I just,
right,
you enjoy working with this crew, you love working with this crew, and to meet them in person was quite something. There's definitely something for that to be
yeah,
said for that same room. There's
yeah,
also there's moments I miss where I can knock on someone's door and say, "Hey, do you have a second?" And then
right,
it doesn't have to be a meeting. It doesn't have to be a time that then gets set for a Zoom. It's something that we can just resolve even with directors. You can say,
yeah,
yeah, red or green for that thing, and then you could just do it and then make sure that that gets
right,
done. And there's definitely an advantage to that.
yeah,
But there's
yeah,
also, I think that the balance I would like to keep. I love that I don't have to be on a train every day. Like when I was
sure,
working in New York City, that journey was there's every day. And like I say, that this gardening thing
right,
was my strange journey to Netflix via the writing, because
yeah,
creative outlet I still like to do is writing and yeah, a little bit art, um but there's a balance. I think in my job, I call myself a creative producer. Like I
right,
care about the budget, and I want to get this done. But I also, there's something about this thing, animation, that I absolutely love. And when I see good animation, I love it. So I also want
right,
it to be good. I just don't want it to be over budget, right? I want it to be good. Or if this thing is worth going over budget for, I'll
sure,
find the money like from somewhere else. And
right,
that's what I was juggling the whole of Leo. I was juggling for the need for resources and the need for, like, we have, I don't know, it's going to be interesting to see. It's on Netflix, 21st of November on Netflix, this
right,
thing. Um, and we did this. There was one point that Adam thought, because on Netflix, the end credits, the main on end credits before the rolling credits, they're usually just cards. They're just still cards, because Netflix doesn't want you hanging on to the credits. They want you, like, they're
right,
showing you the next thing.
yeah,
And Adam said, like, that's boring. I want to do some animated thing. They do this 2D animation, which
right,
is worth watching because it's sort of funny, cute animation in a completely different style from the movie. They
yeah,
animate it's like 2D simple animation at the end
sure,
for the credits. And so I was throwing balls like that to catch, and then Dan, okay, you need to find money now to pay for that. So that was a constant juggle. Is
yeah,
Adams and directors, but Adam is there as well, saying, "This is what I want." Adam being an extraordinary, aside from my own personal opinion of him as an amazingly talented man, he's a huge, just on a practical level, is a huge asset to Netflix. Who, part of my job is keep this man happy, right?
yeah,
Because there's not somebody that you want to drive away from Netflix.
sure,
And so when there are these asks for something that's additional cost, then I've like the whole time trying to find the money and juggling, like always working with, again, a terrific accounts team at Netflix. And so they were little sort of pockets of money, like there was something in there for, there's something I see there that we were planning if we added another star. We have like Jason Alexander and Bill Burr, like some really good names in the movie. And so we had sort of little money in there in case they decided to cast somebody else, like a bigger name, and then we didn't. So I took that money and that paid for for our end credit animation. So that part of it I love. And again, it's something in that. I would go back to when I was at art college, and I was good enough with a pencil, but not great. And then I've animated. In my career, I've animated. I remember on a Rice Krispie commercial, Snap, Crackle, and Pop. It's not. I was never going to be as good an animator as I was always going to be frustrated. But then I realized these creative people, they need managing, right? And so but at the same time, so as I'm managing them, I want them to succeed.
Yeah.
I take away this thing like, we need this by Tuesday. And then, that's my job, is to give them so they don't have to think about anything else. They can just create. And then I'm going to need to see something next Tuesday. And that, then they can clear their minds of the other stuff that they probably don't like, which is like the management and the money and all that other.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah, it's a funny business. I worked in advertising for a while, and I remember I was a senior vice president at a big ad agency, and he said to me, it was like a lament. He said, sort of like, we keep the creative folks in a certain spot in the business because we want them just to stay creative.
Yes.
But he said sometimes it's to our detriment, because I think some of them really need to get into the business. They really need to. But so he said it's a torment for him, and he was the same. He was a creative director, but he had become very much like yourself, creative producer. He was running large campaigns, directly involved with the client, and had, as his career evolved, gotten less hands-on with the actual creative and more about managing the client and making sure everything was going to come in, all the trains were going to come in at the right time. But yeah, it's an interesting thing, and I think of some artists I know who are now managing other artists, and they miss being back on the board or back on the box or being hands-on sometimes, just doing what they used to do. But at some points in their career, it's they've been around it long enough, or they've been given an opportunity to be a supervisor and move up, and the money is better for a lot of them, so there's that part of the business. But they still have these days where if I could just sit down and paint something or draw something.
I found that we had again, terrific. We had a director of animation, because again, with all the different, like with the directors, we needed one voice who could take this to Animal Logic, who are animating this, and convey that. Like he knows how this character behaves, or all the characters, but specifically, I guess our two main characters of Leo and Squirtle, the turtle. And he would convey that. But I know for him, there are times when he could animate something. He would always love it. You could see the joy in his face, where, what, I'll just do this as an example, and I can show the animators. And he would do something. And I think you're right, that they love being in that supervisory role. Again, the money's good, and you can put your name to something.
Sure.
But there's nothing like, for these artists, like sitting on the box and just doing it. And now they miss it.
Yeah, absolutely. Great. So, curious, sort of next steps. What's the project's pretty much wrapped, I guess, and it launches in a few weeks' time. Are you on the hunt, I guess, for another role? And
I'm on the hunt, and I have loved being line producer on this show. So see, I again, going back to, I love visual effects, and that's kind of where New York had led me. But there was a point at which it was all like explosions and blood and horror and stuff. So I loved, in the last 3 years, going back to telling a really cute kid story. So ideally, I'm looking for that. But again, I think it's been an adventure that I could never have planned for this. I often talk at schools, and apart from the persistence, the tenacity of trying to find somewhere, exploring, doing all your homework, it's it's amazing to me in my career how fortunate I've been, how like, that I've just been kind of led in in different directions. So I'm curious to know myself what the the next thing is. But ideally, I would love to work on another feature as a line producer, because particularly last year. Last year has been an incredible, probably the biggest challenge in my career in terms of logistics, having all of these parties, keeping this, helping our producer and production manager, helping us as a team to get this all together, running, delivering at the end, it's been a challenge, but I feel, as with every challenge, you feel stronger for it in the end.
Right.
So yeah, I'm hoping that as we speak, the hopefully SAG strike is ending, and that
Right.
things can start really opening up and start moving forward. Yeah, I've worked on TV shows, but that's also something else I think that I would love. I've got one eye looking now on like what it's like. I worked in episodic in visual effects,
Yeah.
but maybe a fully animated children's show
Right.
would be fun to work on.
Excellent. Great. And are you physically located in LA or New York? Where's home become?
So I'm physically right now located in LA. There was one point that I was talking to somebody. The project got shelved, but I was talking about moving to LA. So open to the move, and particularly time in my life. My third child is now in college, so
Ah,
it frees up my wife for the next adventure. So
right.
we've moved in our lives. We moved from London to Orlando to New York, and
Yeah.
again, the next adventure can really be anywhere where there's a good project.
Great. Excellent. Good. Good. Well, we wish you luck. I'll keep my eye out, see what's going on, and keep in touch. So
Thank
thank
you
you
very much.
very much. If I would assume if people want to find you, they can find you on LinkedIn.
Absolutely, yes. I on LinkedIn. I think my contact details are there.
Yeah.
Yes, reach out to me anytime. And even if
Excellent.
it's only to talk about animation, because as you can probably tell from this interview, I love it, and I can talk about it for much longer than the time we've been
Yeah.
speaking.
Might be for gardening tips too. It's winter. People are bringing a lot of plants in. So just
Oh,
kidding.
don't get me started. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, thank you again, Daniel. It's a pleasure chatting with you today, and we look forward to connecting with you soon.
Thank you very much.